Good evening, friends. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I would be talking about the DSM 2014 part. This whole series is in continuation, is all about the DSM 2022, which has been just introduced. And in order to explain you about the 2020, what's there in the 2022 new regulations of DSM, I want you to understand how the whole history of DSM is going about. So, in my earlier video, which if you have not watched, do watch in the channel, and where I've explained about the two-part tariff and the ABT tariff. So, in my this video, I would be covering upon the DSM 2014 part. What's the basically guidelines or the things which are in the 2000, DSM 2014 part, and then if I would be able to complete this video within the stipulated time of 15 minutes, then I would start with the DSM 2022 part. Otherwise, I will try to stick my video in the for the DSM 2014 part only. So, without wasting much time, let's begin with the DSM 2014 is came into force on 17th February 2014, and since the CRC majorly brought it as a regulatory mechanism to ensure grid stability and to impose this to have these regulations in force, there is a basically two things. One is a penalty, another is an incentive. There is a penalty for under injection or deviation from the schedule, and there is a also incentive to support the grid at the time of the requirements. The basic thing about this DSM is that it is linked to the frequency. That if at under frequency, if the frequency of the grid is low, and if you are uh, uh, injecting more to the grid, then you would be given a certain incentive. But if at the same time if the frequency is low and you are under injecting or you are deviating from your schedule in a negative way, then in that condition you would be penalized. Similarly, if the frequency is more and at the same time if you are generating less, then also you would be given a certain incentives, or you would be not to pay any penalty. And similarly, if the frequency is more and still you are injecting more into the grid, then you are asked to pay a certain penalty also. So the CRC has issued regulation related to scheduling and forecasting, which provide the mechanism to award and penalize under various scenarios of overdrawal or under injection and of over injection, overdrawal slash over injection or underdrawal slash under injection of the electricity. Now, now to understand this DSM 2014 regulations, we need to understand this DSM vector first. Uh, in this DSM vector, the grid frequency is divided into four components. One is less than 49.7 Hz, one is between 49.7 Hz to 50 Hz, then third one is between 50 Hz to 50.05 Hz, and fourth is between after or the frequency greater than 50.05 Hz. Now, at these four reference points, that is at 49.7 Hz, or I would say that three reference point at 49.7 Hz, at 50 Hz, and at 50.05 Hz, the CRC has put certain rates of deviation. For example, at 49.7 Hz, there is a rate of 8 rupees 24 paisa. At 50 Hz, there is a rate of rupees 1.78 paisa, 1 rupees 78 paisa. And at 50.05 Hz, there is a rate of 0 paisa. Now, let me explain you this graph first. If the frequency of the grid is less than 49.7 Hz or is at 49.7 Hz, here I am talking about the average frequency during the time block. I am not talking about the instantaneous frequency. If during a time block of 15 minutes, if the average frequency of that period is at 49.7 Hz or less than that, that is 49.69, 49.68 or 67, then any deviation, whether by the buyer or by the seller, would be charged at a rate of 8 rupees 24 paisa. Next, if now next, similarly at 50 hertz, the grid has put the rate of rupees 1 rupees 78 paisa. So any if the average frequency of the block stays at 50 hertz in a time block, then the any deviation would be penalized at a rate of 1 rupee 78 paisa. Now, what will happen between when the frequency is at 49.90 hertz or between 49.70 to 50 hertz? During for this frequency range, the a slope has been put in which the one endpoint is 49.7 hertz, which is at 8 rupees 24 paisa, and the another endpoint is 50 hertz, which is at 1 rupees 78 paisa. Now, these two points have been interconnected as shown here. So, in order to get any price or deviation between these two frequency range, I have to simply do a simple arithmetic calculation and I can simply get it. Or I can say that for any 0.01 hertz change of frequency, there is a change of almost 20.84 paisa in deviation. If the frequency improves, then the deviation charges would improve by 20.84 paisa for per 0.01 hertz change in frequency, and the frequency deteriorates, similarly there would be a change of 20.84. Now at 50.05 the deviation rate is set at 0, means if you inject more than at 50.05 you will not get any uh, incentive. Now, before that, after completing this deviation vector, I would try to explain how this rate actually affects you further. So, at 50.05 hertz, I would be getting my frequency, my DSM rate is set at 0 hertz. Now, so at 50 hertz, the rate is 1 rupee 78 paisa. At 50.05, the rate is set as 0 paisa. So any 0.05, 0.01, so during this 0.05 hertz change in frequency, the rate reduces from 1 rupee 78 paisa to 0. So for every 0.01 hertz in change in frequency, the rate reduces or the rate changes by 35.60 paisa. Now, how this vector actually affects you. Suppose I've been given a schedule of 480 megawatt, and because of certain reasons I've been running my unit at suppose 465 megawatt. So this 15 megawatt which I'm generating less, okay, here I'm talking about the average schedule, so not about the instantaneous schedule. So the average schedule which has been given to me by the grid to generate is 480 megawatt, but somehow in a time block I am able to deliver only 465 megawatt as an average schedule. Now this 15 megawatt change which I have 15 megawatt which I have delivered less, if I compute in terms of units, that would come to be approximately 15 into 1000 divided by 4. Since I am talking about I have to convert into hours, so it comes to be approximately 3750. So this 3750 units which I have uh, dispatched less, on that 3750 units, though the state will pay me the money for the fuel for the schedule which the state for the beneficiaries which has told me to dispatch, but since I am not able to dispatch, I have been given a penalty. Now this penalty would be based on the frequency vector. For example, if the frequency at that particular moment is less than 49.7 hertz or at 49.7 hertz, then I have to be paid the DSM rate or the penalty rate at that into number of units by which I have displaced my schedule. Similarly, if I over inject at that particular moment, for example, I've been told to run at 480 megawatt, but in order to support the grid, I'm running my unit at 500 megawatt. So this 20 megawatt extra which I've generated in that also the grid will pay me the money, the beneficiaries will pay me the money for 480 megawatt only, but the 20 megawatt which are actually hour generated will be paid to me through this DSM graph. Now it simply comes to a factor that what is my break-even frequency, or I would say what is my ECR rate. If my ECR rate is less than the DSM rate, definitely I would try to inject more at particular frequency, and if my ECR rate is greater than the DSM payable rate, then I would try to inject less. But the grid has clearly told, whatever the condition may be, nobody is allowed to under inject when the frequency is less than 47 Hz, and nobody is allowed to over inject when the frequency is greater than 50.05 Hz. Now let's take one more example to be more clear about on this issue. Suppose the frequencies of the grid, average frequency of the block of in a grid is 50.08 Hz. Now at 50.08 Hz the DSM penalty is 0. Neither I will get anything nor I have to pay anything. Now at that particular moment of time, if my unit is running at 480 megawatt and the schedule is also 480 megawatt, then neither there is a deviation nor there is a penalty. Now, if the schedule is 480 megawatt, but I am running my unit at 500 megawatt, for some reason, for the 20 megawatt which I am actually generating for the fuel I am spending, I would not be given any incentive because the DSM rate is 0. Now, the DSM rate is basically is the any deviation which you do from the schedule. If you generate more, if you do a plus generation, you will get that DSM money in your account, and if you under inject or if you deviate less from if your schedule your actual generation less than the schedule generation, then you have to pay that DSM. So it's like a both plus and negative figure. If you inject more, depending upon the DSM rate at that particular moment of time, you would get that money from the grid, and if you inject less, then depending upon the DSM rate at that point of time, you have to pay the money. But the main advantage for any generator point of view is that whatever the case is, the generator will continue to get the money for the 480 megawatt or the schedule which has been given to him. So therefore it comes to the fact that if the my ECR is less than the DSM rate, I will definitely over inject in order to get more money, and if the my ECR is more than the DSM rate, then definitely I would over inject I would under inject to get to save on fuel, because the amount of fuel I will saved by under injecting would be suppose is my ECR, and the amount of penalty which I pay is DSM. Since ECR is greater than the DSM, then it is always beneficial for a generator to under inject in this condition. Therefore, this DSM is basically certain times used by the generators as an earning tool also. The basic aim of introducing this frequency band is to ensure that the grid frequency band comes comes in the range of 49.90 Hz to 50.05 Hz. In ABT tariff, the range of frequency is fixed at 49.70 to 50.2. Now, with this DSM 2014, it has been ensured that the frequency stays within the range of 49.90 to 50.05. Also, the grid has introduced a capping of 3 rupees 3 paisa for the generators. That is, even if the frequency is 49.7 Hz, a generator has to maximum pay a penalty of 3 rupees 3 paisa. That is basically for the IHGS, because being a thermal plant, there are it's been very difficult for them to actually match the schedule or to uh, avoid any issues in the unit, because it's a very complex system. So in order to facilitate them, there is a cap rate of 3 rupee 3 paisa. So if a thermal power plant of IHGS deviates from its schedule, then he has to be given a maximum capping of 3 rupee 3 paisa. So how it would be a beneficial for a thermal power plant, or how would be it's a uh, issue for a thermal power plant? It may be a both beneficial. For example, if my ECR rate is 3 rupee 40 paisa, then at low frequency of 49.90 or 49.95 or less than my when the DSM rate is greater than my ESM, I can continue to generate more and earn more from the grid. Though I would be supporting the grid at the moment also, but the grid doesn't want to hold like this. Therefore, there is a capping rate of 3p 3 paisa for uh, thermal power plant, and they've also put that if the generator under inject when the frequency is less than 49.7 hertz, then this capping rate penalty would be doubled. So if the frequency is less than 49.7 hertz, then the DSM charges I would pay for under injecting would be 6 rupees 6 paisa. And if the frequency is greater than more than 49.7 hertz, then whatever the DSM rate from the vector will come, my capping would fix at 3 rupee 3 paisa. Rest remains the same, that is on the other end of this frequency side, that is at 50.05 hertz and greater, the DSM rates remain the same, whether it's for thermal power plant or whether it's for other beneficiaries. But when the frequency is less than 49.90 or less than 50 hertz, then there is a capping of 3p 3 paisa for generators, and this capping get doubled if the frequency gets below 49.7 hertz, and at other point of time when the frequency is more than 49.7 hertz, this capping is set at 3p 3 paisa. I hope you have understood this DSM factor. So let's stop here only in this video, and since this video has already been of 17 minutes, and if you have any doubts related to the vector, how this vector work, please mention in the comment section. So in the next video I would be covering on the further modification of in DSM 2014 regulation, which came into effect on 2019. So once we done that, and then we can clearly proceed to DSM 2022 regulations. So till then, good night, take care. Please subscribe to my channel and do press the like button. Take care.